The Brotherhood of Steel is more than a gang of technostic knights roaming across the wasteland, killing super mutants like a boss and looting the ruins of the old world. They're a culture with a rich history and tradition. Let's place ourselves at the moment of the Brotherhood's birth. Soldiers stationed at the Mariposa Research Facility in the ass end of the desert. Maybe you're a young private. Maybe you're a junior officer with family living on base. Whatever the case, you are bound by duty and oath to the Constitution of the United States, the land of the free, standing as a bulwark against the tyranny of communist China. So you do your job, protecting some of America's best and brightest scientists as they work on the science. You don't need to understand it, just trust it. And then you find out that in this case, the science involved exposing unwilling captives, military prisoners, to an engineered mutagenic virus hoping to make superhuman abominations, but in practice just killing the test subjects in horrible, agonizing ways. You, your comrades, your immediate superiors are appalled. Captain Roger Maxson is so disgusted by his interrogation with one of the researchers that he can't help but kill the murderous little functionary. The base commander, Colonel Spindell, just can't hack it and offs himself. And there you are, mutinous soldiers under the command of a young captain. Maxson rangers up, takes command, and gets on the radio. He announces that he and his men are no longer subject to the authority of the United States or of the Army. It was hoped that exposing the horrors would force a reckoning, that by seceding with the entire base, the military would be forced to respond and the public would demand accountability. But no response came. Think about that. Over the course of a few days, you discover that rather than defending liberty and justice, you've been facilitating horror and atrocity. And then when you take a stand against it, prepared to face the consequences for doing what you know is right, nobody gives a shit. Then, 3 days later, war breaks out between the United States and China, and the world burns. Captain Roger Maxson is in charge of this group of survivors sitting on top of a mutagenic virus in the middle of a desert in a nuclear apocalypse. While the top levels of government, the Enclave, are ensconced in well-stocked facilities, Maxson's remnant of the U.S. Army has to do what the Army often has to do. Take a half-full bag of dog shit and make it work. So they bury the dead, seal up the toxic sludge as best they can, gather all the supplies, and head out into the desert for a better-stocked fallout shelter, the Lost Hills Bunker Complex. They lose some people on the way. Some die from exposure. Others are killed by desperate bandits eager to snatch their supplies. Maxson loses his wife on the Exodus. Only after they'd secured the bunker and settled into its safe underground confines could they really grieve and take stock of everything that had happened. That's when everyone had to accept that the world they knew was gone and they were no longer the people they'd been just a few weeks before. They weren't American soldiers. The civilians weren't civilians anymore. They were something new, a tightly knit community forged in fire. A brotherhood. And here is where that shared experience became the basis of an organization and a culture. The recovery of equipment began as an ad hoc survival measure, became an ingrained practice, and gradually an ideology coalesced around it. When industrial civilization is gone, what was once a cheap manufactured item becomes an irreplaceable finite commodity. But that only explains why the Brotherhood recovers and hoards technology, not why they built a pseudo-religious Templar-esque order around it. For that, we have to look at who the early Brotherhood were. Because they weren't just soldiers. It was their families, too. Practical necessity wasn't enough. They needed a narrative around what they were doing to survive. Something that had an element of hope. And so they said they were preserving technology not just for their own use, but to preserve knowledge for the future, to rebuild civilization. When the Brotherhood seizes technology from others, it's not just looting, it's taking dangerous devices away from irresponsible people that don't understand the risks. Around this paternalist idea, they crafted a knightly order as guardians of mankind's future. And Captain Maxon recognized that they needed a structure that acknowledged how much things had changed. He could have just promoted himself to general or president, but that would have been kind of douchey. So instead, the Brotherhood adopted ranks that fit their new self-image. Knights and paladins. Maxon became elder. But practical concerns weigh heavily on ideals. While the Brotherhood grew, both from new generations born into it and new recruits from the world outside, growth not only gives strength, but also imposes costs. Some thought the costs were too high and pushed for less contact with the outside. When that society formed, the conditions in which it formed were baked into its thinking. Deep down, they remained that small group of survivors seeking shelter from the hostile world. They thought ahead day to day. There wasn't any real long-term strategic thinking, and this would plague the Brotherhood for generations. A pivotal moment for the Brotherhood came in 2135 with the death of Roger Maxon from cancer. The organization could have gone in many different directions from here. The Brotherhood, already a pseudo-medieval order, set a monarchical precedent as Maxon II took up his father's mantle as elder, though this would not be an unbroken line. Plenty of non-Maxons will have their opportunity at leading the Brotherhood to the brink of ruin. During this time, the world outside was settling into gangs, tribes, and proto-nations. The Brotherhood fought a war with the Vipers, a large raider gang held together by a pagan snake religion. During the initial engagement, Maxon II was killed. All you young squires that gripe about how we keep harping on you to always wear your helmet in the field, well, this is why. Elder Maxon II didn't, and some illiterate wastelander killed him with a poisoned stick. Let that be a lesson to you. No, paladin dance is not an example to emulate. Where was I? Ah, yes, Maxon II. His son, John Maxon, took the title of elder, and the Brotherhood waged a war of extermination against the Vipers, and then against the super mutants created by a vile mutant thing arrogantly calling itself the Master, but that's a tale I'll not tell here. The Brotherhood was becoming a victim of its own mythology, even as it was faced with the reality of growing technological powers in the world, most notably the New California Republic and the Enclave. The Brotherhood continued to see itself as the guardian of technology and became increasingly hesitant to recruit from outside or even to open itself to contact. But at the same time, its mission of technological recovery required expeditions around the continent. This posed a plethora of logistical headaches. They couldn't just load up a few trucks and drive down I-94, so they came up with this whole plan involving airships. The Brotherhood loves its rigid dirigibles. They offer a way to conduct long-range expeditions over rugged terrain with no infrastructure on the way. But this doesn't come without trade-offs. Using airships means you arrive at your destination slow and loud with a relatively small force, no armor or artillery, and extremely limited air support. It's a high-risk proposition. As this particular cross-continental airship expedition learned when they got caught in a storm and crashed somewhere near the old city of Chicago. They got a little strange after that. We don't really have anything to do with them. A lot of people like to pretend that this whole Chicago incident never happened. It's all a bit embarrassing. Good pizza, though. Another expedition made it all the way to the old capital, Washington, D.C., and it would in time become the Brotherhood's center of gravity. This eastern detachment under Owen Lyons was in some ways enacting the old ideals of the Brotherhood. They were not only recovering technology, they were employing it to rebuild, to make lives better. While the old Brotherhood in the Mojave was busy losing a war with the NCR, the Eastern Brotherhood was fighting the Enclave for the future of America. Let's briefly look at these two wars. The Brotherhood's defeat in the West can be traced back to some core failings going back to its founding. Man for man, Brotherhood Knights are superior to NCR soldiers. But while the Brotherhood recruited from within its own insular population, trained its knights in a ritualized manner, and equipped them with painstakingly maintained laser weapons and power armor from the old world, the NCR conscripted from its entire population, a population that was growing not only from a rising birth rate, but also the annexation of new territory. They had more soldiers and they could replace them. But more importantly, the NCR was an expansionist nation-state with strategic goals. Everything they did was in some way tied to this expansionism. The NCR was building while the Brotherhood was merely preserving. A war between a vision of a new world and a memory of the old one. Defeat was inevitable unless the Brotherhood itself drastically changed. Contrast this with the war in the East between the Brotherhood and the Enclave, which was at its core a civil war between remnants of the old country. The Enclave were descended from the political class, while the Brotherhood had a direct military lineage. Both were trapped in the past. The Enclave could never escape the pull of their desire to badly govern a country that no longer existed, while the Brotherhood was trapped in its military box. It could never quite escape the junior officer thinking of its founding. The Brotherhood and the Enclave were estranged siblings, pieces of a broken nation that could never be put back together, fighting over an inheritance that had already been spent. And while, despite this, the Eastern Brotherhood purified the Potomac and destroyed the Enclave in what could have been a time of glory and honor, a time of hope for better days ahead, there was no strategic goal beyond defeating the Enclave in the capital wasteland. The Brotherhood couldn't even understand what to do if the will had been there. Like the Enclave, the Brotherhood never understood that the root of civilization is not government, but commerce. The Brotherhood had an opportunity here to create a spark of growth around the Project Purity site by trading not only clean water, but also manufactured goods that they were in a unique position to produce. The combination of essential commodities and security could have led to a trading hub, then a city, attracting traveling merchants and artisans, farming, manufacturing, trade, all without the Brotherhood having to step in and directly organize any of it. But the Brotherhood's leaders think like lieutenants, not generals. They fight battles, not campaigns. All they could see was the transactional goodwill of the people that came from giving them water, and they were fixated on the dangers of technology, blinding them to the benefits of its spread. Where there could have been labor-saving machines and low-effort tax revenue to the Brotherhood, instead heavily armed caravans were sent out into the wasteland with barrels of water strapped to the backs of Brahmin, attracting attacks from every raider gang and mutant creature roaming the wastes, giving it away, putting knights at risk for no real gain. Elder Lyons was a nice enough guy, but he was really too soft and woolly-headed for the job. And he planted new seeds of destruction in the Brotherhood. Some of the members, unhappy with his direction, split off and became outcasts. And all the while, the young Arthur Maxon was there on the East Coast, watching and learning before he came of age. With the passing of Elder Lyons and some of the usual succession bullshit, young Arthur took on his family heritage and became elder. The outcasts were reunited with the Brotherhood, and teams of knights and scribes roamed the East Coast, recovering secrets of the old world. And of course, the Prydwen, the Brotherhood's first war zeppelin, allows power projection across half the continent, though with all the drawbacks mentioned previously. As I sit here, that giant bag of hydrogen and rocket fuel is parked at the airport just outside Boston, where any raider or super mutant with a rocket launcher could take it down with a lucky hit. But oh heavens forbid that Captain Kells or that bearded blustering Stalinist putzing around the observation deck would ever listen to a salty old scribe. It's not as though our entire job is to know things. Midwest Brotherhood originally, those East Coast elitist scribes are really out of touch with what's going on in the continent.